Hi, my name is Ismail Amla. I'm from Capita. I'm the Chief Growth Officer of Capita. And I'm really excited that I'm here now with Dame Jaynan Gadhia, who many of us will know as the former CEO of Salesforce UK and Ireland and Virgin Money, and now founder of the fintech Snoop. Real good talking to you today, Jaynan. Very exciting to have you here.
Lovely to see you, Ismail. Thanks very much.
What a fantastic, inspirational career. And I'm sure as you've gone through your career, you've probably got to a stage where you thought, well, I've seen everything. And then COVID happens, where everything changes. And I know we're sort of still in the middle of it, but as you look back from February, March, any thoughts on, lessons learned personally or from a business perspective? What sort of things come to mind to you?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I don't know about anyone else, but I certainly spent the first few weeks not quite believing it was happening. And finding it really positively surprising, I guess, how we as a nation, and particularly as a business community, sort of adapted so fast. For everybody to be able to get onto Zoom, or to be able to work from home, or to be able to think about how the business had to adapt so quickly, I just thought was brilliant. And I'm sure we'll come and talk about innovation, but in a sense, I think it was a real evidence to me about how so many people can adapt so quickly to changing circumstances when they have to, not because they want to, but because they have to, and do that powerfully and positively. So I think actually, understanding all of the difficulties that it's created, I do think that it's proven to us as a nation, an economy, and a human race that actually, if we have to make change, we can do it, and we can do it well.
We can do it really fastly. We had an experience where we moved, I think, 20,000 call center people from call centers to working from home. And actually, if you'd have asked us before that if it was possible, everybody would have said not possible.
Yeah.
And so you're absolutely right. We sort of did some things because we had to. We had to move.
Yeah, and don't you think that in the world of business, we spend an awful lot of time analysing things and convincing ourselves that it might take 2 years and lots of money before we can even think about doing it. But actually, we could be so much more responsive and so much more effective as a consequence, I think.
Yeah, and I was thinking whether, and it took a crisis to generate that sort of energy and the whole momentum around the move. Does it need to take a crisis to create so much change and innovation? And why is innovation so hard in large enterprise? I mean, you worked across large enterprise and now startups. What's your views on that?
I just think we're all naturally, the vast majority of people naturally dislike change, don't we? Funny enough, during lockdown and since actually, I've been listening to quite a lot of podcasts, and it's really interesting as I've listened to people's life stories, whether they're in the business community or beyond, how real change and success seems to come from a problem. There's very few people that are born into success and sort of flourish as a result of their brilliant background, as far as I can tell. And, to a certain extent, that's my story too. And I do think that, again, perhaps as a human race, we do need a bit of a crisis, a bit of something that says, right, we're going to address this, we're going to fight hard, we're going to prove we can not only survive but succeed. And that's the driver for so much, I think. So unfortunately, yes, I think it did need a crisis. The thing that is interesting to me is that it feels as if we've had a much, so far, and there's all sorts of disasters still to recover from, but it felt for me as a nation and a business community that the problems of COVID were much more positively embraced than the problems of the financial crisis. And I think that's been interesting because, and again, just my sort of meagre reflections would be that at the time of the crisis, there was quite a small cadre of people, often the bankers, who were blamed for the problems that happened and perhaps were never seen to have paid for that in any particular way. Whereas I think in the crisis of COVID, because it's something that united our entire communities and no one was to blame, we were able to pull together and do something that's effective. So I do think there's a broad crisis, if you like, that where we all feel a common ownership of both its sort of beginning, middle and end is much more powerful than just a crisis that's been created by particular behaviours or particular problems.
Yeah. The other thing I think with this crisis that may be different is the reason for the purpose of a business has become more apparent, right? So people have realized that actually business is not just about livelihoods, but it's also about lives. And I think the leaders, I mean, Mark Benioff is one, right, where during this crisis has come forward and said, actually, our role is much more than providing customer value. I think has been quite profound.
I mean, I'm thrilled that you say that, and I completely agree with it. So my experience in that sense has been that for many, many years now, I have felt that, I mean, it happened, to be honest, when I had my daughter, who's now turned 18, so this is a long time ago, and she was a baby. I went back to work, and I remember standing up in front of my team at Virgin Money, quite emotional at the time, so I don't really want to be here unless it makes a difference, because why would I come to work and leave my baby if it wasn't to do something that's important? And I thought I might have been over emotional. I looked up and everyone was in tears, and everyone agreed. You know, it was really interesting, and it gave us that real impetus to say, so let's create a business with purpose and drive that's going to do some good in the world that we can all be proud of. And we created an objective for Virgin Money, which was to make everyone better off. You know, our customers, our staff, our communities, as well as our shareholders. And people really got behind that. And I would say that it was the single biggest differentiator that created a valuable and successful business. And so having left Virgin Money and then met Mark Benioff, it was actually the values of the man and the business that I completely identified with and supported. And he absolutely has been able to live those values in a very significant way, and particularly, as you say, through the crisis. And, you know, as I've set up my new business called Snoop, again, we're very focused on how can we help people to be better off, rather than how are we creating a sort of business unit just for shareholder benefit. And I see this in so many ways now, that when I first started to talk about business with purpose, it was seen as a bit of a sort of soft thing. And now it doesn't feel so unusual. I think people are, in so many places, are looking for that purpose.
Yeah, and I do want to come on to Snoop, but while we're talking about social impact and purpose, which actually, for me, also resonates in terms of why do you work for somebody, and I think it resonates with so many of our workforce. You've been a real advocate for diversity, and with the social unrest in the USA and the increasing spotlight on the BLM movement, what are your thoughts about how the UK are reacting, UK business in particular, about increasing our diversity in our workforce?
Well, it's interesting because I've got sort of both positive things to say about that and also some concerns, I guess. So positively, my experience is very much that, you know, the vast majority of business people, and broader than business, you know, people that run institutions in our country, are very much looking to see how we can create a truly diverse workforce or community. And I think the desire and drive to achieve that is real and positive. And, you know, I can see that through when I'm talking to people about putting together teams or boards or meetings or committees or whatever, we're all saying, is this diverse enough? Have we got the right, you know, blend, mix and challenge of people that are going to help us to have a really deep and meaningful and creative discussion, and is the output going to be better as a result? So I'm really positive about that. You know, it's something that's on the table and people are taking very seriously. The thing that I'm concerned about still is that I sense in many of the experiences that I have a little bit of, you know, particularly in the city, there's been so much criticism in the past of the establishment, in inverted commas, being a bit of an old boys network, and that often that's meant, you know, white middle-aged men that had a similar background and perhaps played rugby together or whatever. Yeah. I have found that those people do exist. Of course, we all know that that's the case. And when I'm talking to them about diversity, what they tend to say is, and these are good people that want to make a difference, right? But what they tend to say to me is, don't understand it. Why do people think we're exclusive? Of course people can come in and join us. We open our arms to them, but then we expect them to behave like us. Yeah. And that, I think, is the biggest single concern that I have, that I know as a woman, that I've been judged about. Again, my behaviour has been judged against the expectations of that male establishment. And I'm sure that's true of ethnic communities too. And actually, and, all sorts of diversity, frankly. And actually what we want isn't, well, we can all come into the same sort of the hallowed place as long as we all behave the same. Yeah. We want to bring our differences and create something that's bigger and different and progressive and unique. And I think that's the journey that we still need to go on fast and furious.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more, and we probably share some similar experiences. How are you allowed to bring yourself to work as you are?
Yeah, exactly.
And as part of that, and I promise this is the last question related to COVID and social impact maybe, but you've also talked around mental health in the past, which has been real role model behaviour, because this for a long while was seen as a weakness. With COVID, people working from home, people working differently, and of course a lot of people are saying we're not quite sure what the impact on mental health is going to be as a result of this lockdown and working remotely. What are you doing with your own teams to sort of check in and making sure that you're spotting where there might be potential issues?
I think it's difficult because I do think that, building on our earlier conversation, people are all very different, aren't they? Yeah. And so for some people, I think I'm one of them actually, I found the consequences of COVID positive to my mental health. And as you say, I certainly understand what it is to struggle with your mental health, but I found it positive to have a bit more time for myself for thinking and, spending a bit more time with the family and outside a little bit more. That's been helpful to me. And yeah, of course, I work with people that are at completely at the other end of the scale that say, well, actually, I'm operating from a very small flat that I'm sharing with people that I didn't expect to spend this amount of time and proximity with. I haven't got space to look at my Zoom. I can't get out and run or whatever it happens to be. I just need to get back in the office and I'm not feeling great. And I think that the problem with technology, we're on Zoom at the moment and it's been magnificent to enable us all to keep together. But I think you miss, don't you, the thing that I have found so powerful in the business world, which is the real human interaction. It doesn't come around the meeting table. It's when you go and get a cup of coffee or meet in the lift or, bump into your friend in the loo or whatever it happens to be. Then you have your human conversations. And I think I would argue that through Zoom, I have felt that I've been able to keep my teams well led, I hope, in terms of the business that we operate together. Yeah. But it's much, much harder to maintain that sort of human friendship and collegiate approach. And I don't really know how to overcome that. I mean, I've tried to take time to ring people or email people and see how they are. But again, I think technology in my current experience is functional. It's more IQ than EQ, and I worry that we haven't yet got the EQ sorted out.
Yeah. Moving on to your new venture, Snoop, and I think from what I was reading, Snoop have fared incredibly well through the crises. You had your raise since the launch in April. What do you think is it about the purpose of Snoop that has captured people's imagination?
Directly, our aim, intention, and currently we're executing it well, it seems, is to enable people to understand their finances simply and easily, see how they can manage their finances better, and where they want to take action to achieve a better outcome, we can do that for them. So it takes away all of the apathy that we saw in the banking world historically has relied on apathy. That customers don't look at, am I overspending? Have I got direct debits that I don't really want? Can I manage my cash flow properly? And unfortunately, that sort of negativity and lack of engagement with financial services has created quite a lot of profitability for banks. And the intention in Snoop has been to turn that around and say, okay, we understand that finances can be sort of dull and boring and people have got better things to do, particularly during lockdown. So to the extent that you're prepared to share banking transaction data with us, both historic and current, we can tell you where you're spending on direct debits and check that you really want to do that. We can make sure that you're not overspending compared to people like you on all sorts of utilities and other activities. We can show you your cash flow. We can make sure that you've got enough money for the bills that are coming in the month ahead. And people are genuinely loving it. And what's happening is it's created a sort of a bit of a social community of people sharing their own tips. So before the crisis, for example, we had a little office at Waterloo Station, which was the reason that we noticed this. And we started off by telling travellers into Waterloo how they could get money back if their train was delayed. And lots of people hadn't realised they could. And now, now the travellers, or then the travellers on the train themselves, were sharing with each other how to maximise that, or where to get a cheaper cup of coffee on Waterloo Station from here than there. Now, that might sound a small point, but I love the fact that we're offering a service that's, I hope very helpful for people at the higher level financially. And then individuals are taking that on and saying, well, I can help, I can look for these benefits too and share them with the community. And it started to feel, I think, a little bit of a movement, which is about us, the people, making sure we're not getting ripped off by the big banks and the big businesses. And I think that's what's created a very high level of engagement.
Right. And as you move from, Virgin Money, Salesforce, to this startup environment, I mean, generally in a startup environment, the sense is it's more agile, more innovative. Are you finding that as you get into this environment?
Yes, although, with both Salesforce and Virgin Money and all businesses, of course, we've all had to start from scratch at some point, haven't we? Yeah. So, I started Virgin Money, it was called Virgin Direct originally. We started Virgin Direct from nothing 25 years ago. Mark Benioff, who you mentioned earlier, of course, started Salesforce from nothing. And Richard Branson, all of his businesses really came from the ground. And so I think my experience has been all around entrepreneurship. It's simply that because I've been around quite a long time, some of those some businesses have failed along the way, but the ones that we're discussing are the ones that have grown and flourished. And that's the question, I think, is, so how do you take something that started from nothing and create something as successful as a Virgin or a Salesforce? And I think that the trick that I've seen is that as far as possible, you need to keep the entrepreneurial startup culture of, as you say, agility, innovation, change, focus, excitement, and keep that going as the business grows. Really, really hard to do, I agree. But I think that that's the trick, whereas, I've also worked for Norwich Union, as it was then, Aviva now, and RBS. And some of the problems in those companies, I think, happen where they've been around for a very long time. They seem to have a sort of solid purpose, but it's not terribly exciting, and change isn't something that's necessary. And so you get sort of sucked in, I think, to a process. And people tend to execute on their process. And I do think that some of these bigger, more legacy companies are going to have to find a way of being more relevant and more agile for the future to survive, to be honest.
Yeah, and I think for the legacy companies, as you refer to them, the thing is they do have a wealth of powerful tools and assets. They have the brand legacy, customer data, customers, channels. They've got things, if they could build on them, they could actually get competitively quite distinct. But it is a question of culture, right, that you talk about there, really.
Yeah, undoubtedly culture. I mean, I did a review a few years ago now, in 2015, about why women tended not to want to stay in financial services and progress through the ranks, and we came up with a charter called the Women in Finance Charter. And in order to sort of come up with the recommendations around this review, I did a survey of thousands of people around the country that work for financial services to find out why people didn't like to progress through the financial services hierarchy. And shame on me, I had expected a lot of women to say, well, I've got a family to look after or whatever. Of course, nobody did. Everybody said it's down to culture. Everybody said, that there are many things culturally in financial services that don't suit me. And by the way, in particular, there was a bonus culture that women particularly disliked in financial services, which is slightly by the by. So I'm completely agreeing that culture is important. I also think, and I understand the practicalities here, but I also think that one of the things that we're seeing at the moment, and we often see when businesses get into trouble, is immediately the executive team start to cut costs. And I understand why, but I do think that it's an inevitable disaster waiting to happen. And when I see a big business that's saying, I'm going to halve or, shed thousands of jobs or whatever, you think, well, of course, they've got to sort of manage within their means, but how much better, and hopefully they're doing it in parallel, how much better to think about, well, how can I use these resources and this cost base to create something bigger and more innovative and more relevant to the world that I'm in? Because I just don't believe that you can shrink to greatness. And, as I say, for me, the companies that are reaching to slash costs in times of crisis are probably the ones that don't have the vision to grow out of that crisis.
I'm talking about growing to greatness then, and we've talked about culture, we've talked about skills. One of the things that we are seeing, and I'm seeing, is crazy partnerships being developed. I was reading today that there's talk about Walmart partnering with Microsoft to acquire TikTok, for example. I mean, who'd have thought, right?
Yeah.
And large organizations quite often partner with startups to try and embed some of the agile culture. Where you've seen that work, with Virgin Money or Salesforce, and now it's new, what have organizations done well not to squash the startup as you partner? What sort of lesson?
Well, I mean, it's interesting actually, because I guess my best example of that would be many years ago, and it would be when RBS worked with us at Virgin Direct to create a new banking product, which was called the Virgin One Account. And there was a man called George Matheson, who was the CEO, and he subsequently became the chair of RBS at the time. And we at Virgin had seen lots and lots of bankers to talk about how we could take our successful asset management company to start with into the world of banking. And what all of the other banks wanted to do was to put the Virgin brand on their product. I remember in particular at that time Lloyds Bank saying, well, why don't we just have a Virgin branded credit card sort of thing? And what RBS said, what George Matheson said was, no, we've identified a really innovative product, which was what is now known as a current account mortgage or an offset mortgage. It's not in the UK yet, it started in Australia. And I remember George saying, we'd like to do it with you because we know we at RBS don't have the culture to launch something innovative like that. We just don't have the way of bringing that to life. And I remember being really surprised. We were really small, they were very large. And what happened there was that we did it was actually 51% owned by RBS because they had the banking license, 49 by Virgin, partnership with them. And they left all of the design to us, they left all of the consumer marketing to us, but they provided the governance, of course, in a light touch sort of way, and all of the expertise that we needed to be able to think through the new things that we wanted to do. And that worked brilliantly. Actually, that product and that business surpassed everybody's expectations, both RBS's and Virgin's. And in the end, RBS ended up buying it 100%. And I think that was a very clever move by George Matheson to say, look, let's recognise what we can't do, give these guys the freedom to create what they think does work, but make sure that where they're missing resources and expertise, we provide that within the context of innovation, and it worked really well.
That's a great example, last couple of questions. I mean, I think we could talk for a long while, but we're sort of running out of time. Last couple of questions. What's next for Scoop?
So Snoop is very much focused on the UK consumer at the moment, and we've got a lot more exciting developments for the consumer to build. And then we intend to move into the world of SME businesses. We've got a lot of people, a lot of small business owners in particular, that are saying, gosh, if you can help me to manage my finances as an individual, can you help me manage my business finances, please? And so that will be the next sort of UK step. And then I'm thrilled to say that we've had a lot of interest in Snoop from a variety of countries around the world. And obviously this is something that could go, can we go global? I don't know, but certainly has the potential to go internationally, and that would be the next stage after that. So, I mean, I'm very excited about Snoop as a banker, because in running a retail bank, one of the problems is looking for innovation. I remember Fred Goodwin years ago saying there's no innovation left in banking, it's all about saving or lending sort of thing. And feeling disappointed, and then over the years realising that to a certain extent he was right. And I think all of the innovation comes not from banking, but it comes from helping people to manage their money built on the banking platform. And so, running a retail bank for me felt a bit limiting because of that lack of innovative opportunity. Building off a banking platform has got, as far as we can tell at the moment, infinite opportunities. And the challenge for me really is prioritising them and working out which ones to put in what order.
Yeah, and we wish you all the best. It's one of our favourite startups that we're watching, of course. And as we look into the future, then the final question, and financial services, you give it a great example of an industry that's changing and it sort of responds to regulation, new opportunities, industry lines blurring. What's your final takeaway for business leaders in how best to come out of this period and position for growth?
I think that the really challenging but exciting thing for all business leaders is to try to envisage the future, not hold on to the past. And, it feels to me that COVID, where we started, could be a tipping point in that sense. Yeah. As we said earlier, all of so many things that we thought we might have to get around to at some point in the future are now absolutely at our door. And I think the question really is, so what happens next then? And in a successful business, how can I as a business leader be part of that future? As I say, not holding on to the past. And, in some of these podcasts that I've been enjoying during lockdown, you see some of these transitions through history, which I've really enjoyed, around a changing society. And I think it's so easy, isn't it? Like, as human beings, we always think of all sorts of problems, oh, that'll never happen to me. Yeah. And in businesses, probably, I haven't got to worry about that change yet. Well, it is happening, it will happen to us, and we have got to worry about change. And I really think that the successful leaders of the future are the ones that think creatively about, well, how do I take my business then on a journey that's going to make me relevant for the very changed world that we're going to be living in sooner rather than later. And I think the visionaries that anticipate that will be the people that make a difference for the country, the business, and themselves.
Great last words. So look to the future, let go of the past. Thanks for your time, Dame. It's been fantastic talking to you. I wish we had more time, but thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Ishmael. Great to see you.